Welcome everybody to the Family Biz Show. I am your host, Michael Palumbos with Family Wealth and Legacy here in Rochester, New York. And we are joined by Genevieve Brown Norris, and Rob Norris. I gotta get that right. I just did that wrong, didn't I?
That's good.
Well, welcome to both of you. Really excited to have you guys here. Sea Breeze is the iconic amusement park here in upstate New York, Rochester. And I can't tell you how many school trips I've taken to Sea Breeze growing up for years. I've taken my children to Sea Breeze. I've gotten to take my grandchildren to Sea Breeze. And so we're really blessed to have you both here. The way we typically start the show is, for family-owned business members to talk about what was your journey to enter into the family business, because it's different for everybody. So Rob, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off.
Sure. Thanks for having us here today. This is going to be an interesting thing to share. Born into the business, is an interesting deal that, because we're such a multi-generational family, we were raised actually we had a family compound on the park property, and her grandparents, my parents worked here, my uncles, and that certainly my grandfather was kind of the matriarch of the place, the patriarch. So from a little kid, we started working here, picking up papers and doing whatever task, or counting change banks. And but once we got into high school, I was kind of a pretty young manager. I was a manager of college kids, so you learn how to really work with people that are either older than you or wiser than you. But it kind of gave me my first taste of management. So I got that experience, and then also working around my father, grandfather in the construction end of things. Went to college in Indiana, got a degree in civil engineering, and that gave me quite a great background for working in this industry. Engineering isn't just about numbers; it's solving problems. And with a degree in engineering, structural engineering, gave me such a great background for the park. When we got out of school, my brothers and sisters were also graduating about the same time, a couple years before me and after me. And the park was in tough shape at that time. Very low attendance, teetering on the edge of selling it for condominiums, and as the way of many family-owned parks went at that time. But we presented my grandfather with a plan to say, here's our vision of how we got to do it. But to do it, you got to step aside. So my grandfather graciously stepped aside. My father, who was kind of the general manager at the time, relinquished a lot of his responsibilities at that time, and our generation took over running the place when we were in our young 20s, mid-20s.
How many siblings were all working in the business?
Two brothers and a sister. And we're all still working here today. So we've been working together for 50 years.
Wow.
Just with a cousin.
And then my cousin Susie was a key member also for many years.
Okay.
So we had a team of 5, and we kind of divvied up the task according to where people's best talents were. And we shared all the big decision making. I rose to become the general manager and president of the company, but everybody was a key team member. So very interesting that 99% of our decisions are unanimous. We may have difference of opinions, but we coalesce around a common thought, and that's kind of where we got to be today, because we get strong thoughts, but we figure out what's best for the company. And then, as I always mentioned at Genevieve, we can have some hot discussions. We leave the office and you let it go.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll linger for a day or two, but you let it go.
That's okay. I don't know if you've ever read the book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Patrick Lencioni talks about, you need to have the trust to be able to have those conflicting conversations. It's a conflict. We've never watched a movie that didn't have any conflict. Nobody's going on a roller coaster that doesn't make you lose your stomach or scare you a little bit. We need that conflict. but then you need to commit together. And that's what it sounds like. You've achieved that formula without the training, without having somebody teach you that book. It's just through years of experience. Good for you.
Yeah, well, and by necessity, you learn by the mistakes, you learn by those challenges, and you find a system that works for the family. And
Right.
ours happened to work this way. I know all the families that, it doesn't work that way. And they still survive, but we just happened to have this thing that worked out. Great, we got this far.
Nice. Genevieve, tell us about what was your journey into the family business?
Great question. I was actually living on park property until I was 4, right next to the Jackrabbit. So the sound of roller coasters is very therapeutic for me. But I started around 8 years old in the counting room straightening dollar bills from the games drop boxes. So I would sit there and straighten dollar bills only, for a small amount of time, and I'd get quarters and I'd go down and spend them in the arcade and then come back the next day and do it all over again. So I started off young, then I went to in the cashier department, then I worked in the games department. I became a department manager at 18. Then I went over to the rides department, learned the intricacies of that. And then I became a park manager, and then soon after that, director of operations. So I've gotten my feet wet in a little bit of everything in the park, not as much in maintenance, but everything else operationally, I've got my thumb on. So it's been nice that as much as I loved games and I really wanted to stay in games forever, I knew that I had to learn different aspects of the park to be a better, well-rounded manager of the park. And I did go to St. John Fisher College and graduated there with my business degree and just general business, because I didn't know exactly which concentration I wanted to go in. So I just got a general business degree, and it was great going to school. I worked part-time at the park while going, in high school and then in college, and then started full-time right after I graduated. And have been in the position I've been in for about 12 years now. So
she left out the formative years when in the back of this room there's a big cardboard box that the stuffed animals used to come in. And she had little cutouts, and that was her little playhouse here when she was 3 years old.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in a cardboard box that was like a ring toss size prize, so I could fit in there, and I take my quarters in there and put stickers on it. And I spent a lot of time here as a kid. My other favorite memory as a kid was he would, when we first got our water park, he would turn on the slides in the morning, and I was a good swimmer, and I would just go play in the pools and go up the water slides and have fun. And we had a big bounce house, so we'd blow that up. So I'd go jump on that for an hour just to entertain myself. So I'm an only child, so I had to learn how to entertain myself. But at an amusement park, it is pretty easy to do. Learn how to drive in a golf cart, that type of thing. So it had a lot of my formative years here, and I've spent a lot of time at the park. And I think that's why we both have such a passion for the amusement park industry, not just Sea Breeze, but we grew up here. It's in our blood. We love riding rides. We've been to a lot of parks, something that we're really passionate about, I think, because it was ingrained in us at a young age.
Yep.
We were all, I think, empowered to go and do our own thing, but we've all wanted to come back to the park. And I think that says something about the way we grew up. Obviously, I grew up differently than you did, but I think fundamentally the same thing is there.
Yep.
Very cool. It's interesting that as you're talking about that, when I talk to many family business owners, they talk about that family employment policy, and you guys break the rule, so to speak. The rule is you need to go and spend 5 years, go doing your own thing, prove yourself out there that you can move up the ladder someplace else, and then bring back that knowledge to the family business. And I would throw to you that one of the reasons why that doesn't apply to you guys is for exactly what you're talking about. You've spent so many years inside of the park on a regular basis since the day you started, where like in manufacturing, you're not going to be spending your time in a manufacturing facility. And you're not going to, if you're 10 years old, you're not on the construction site because of, OSHA regulations. You might be on the farm, and that's the farm, I think, is another place where it works quite the same way, where they don't always follow that rule, so to speak.
Yeah, I kind of kick myself because I feel like I could have gone to another amusement park. I have a friend that's in a similar position where his family owns an amusement park, and he actually got to go to Germany and work in at Europa Park for 3 months, I think. And I kind of wish I had done that, but I am such a Rochester homebody. I went to college here. I love Rochester. I have such a Rochester sense of pride. So it was hard for me to leave home, and I'm an only child. So I kind of blame myself for not getting outside of my comfort zone, but I also think it's been beneficial to be here throughout. So I've seen all the changes, and I haven't really skipped a beat because I wasn't gone for a while.
Got it. One of the, the things that I found interesting in just finding you guys is I really didn't know that you were family owned and how many generations. So if I had one piece of advice for your family is put that right up there someplace so that the rest of the world knows that story really, really well. I share this with other families, and you may have heard this before, but the Edelman Trust Barometer is an organization that they measure trust in different areas, and they've done it in family business. And in 2019, that was the last report. Family businesses that promote the fact that they're a family business and let people know, both customers and employees, give them a 20% bump in trust. That's a lot of extra trust.
You mentioned that briefly when our discussions
I did.
in April, and we actually took some of that and rolled it into our PR
This spring.
and people really reached out to us. The media really reached out to us this spring because of being closed for a whole year. And I don't know if you saw the DNC article. There was multiple.
When it opened back,
It was quite a bit. So we actually said, I think you got a good point there. It's time to get the family out there a little more. We're a little more. We're pretty conservative, and we don't like to be the big front and the face on TV. But at the end of the day, I certainly understand people do want to support family businesses. We've certainly seen that this spring and early summer that people really want to come back and support the park, which is great.
The other piece about that is there's a difference between the corporate, there might be one within 45 minutes of us, that's more the corporate flair versus the family flair. And if you think about how you run the park and the decisions you make, and a lot of times it's like, well, what would I want from my family? What would I want to feel? It's not just about how do I maximize dollars, as the people are going through our park. It's like, what would we want? You grew up in that park and have a lot of respect and admiration and, what I'm doing.
What's interesting is one of my common thoughts is, which I tell people, a different time perspective. The corporate parks are really worried about the next quarter. We're worried about the next generation. So it's a whole different philosophy on how you get to that endpoint, and it gives us a little longer vision of we're not so driven by tomorrow. We're driven by the future, and every decision we make, it has to have a little longer term thought to it.
I love that. And, for those of us in upstate New York, we are in Iroquois country. And I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but when the Iroquois were making decisions, it's like, first of all, we need to respect the elders that came 7 generations before us. And we need to think about, because we're borrowing from the future of 7 generations after us. Oh. So how do we make those decisions? And that's really wise that you think that way. Good for you.
I think the other thing too, I think the difference between us and the big corporate parks is we really hone on the experience and the multi-generational experience of the families, because we've been here for so long, and we have a really outstanding TripAdvisor. I don't even know the rankings, but we've been ranked.
Last year we're top 13 in the country.
Yeah.
Wow.
With Disney and SeaWorld and Six Flags. So we are put on the map because of I think the customer service and the experience that we provide. It's not as that big corporate feel, but more that family memory creating generational experience that I think is unique to our park. And there are some other family parks out there that's like us, but I think it's just a different experience than your big Six Flags, Universal, Disney type of things.
Right. It's rush, one to the next, grab some food and go. Where you guys, it is nice to sit and watch and people watch and do all the the nice things with your grandkids and the kids, and I would agree.
Explain to your grandkids, oh, I had those same sugar waffles 40 years ago, and the recipe hasn't changed. It's that type of thing that you can also share those experiences with the younger generation, and they get to experience it.
But the one thing we continually have to do is, but you still want to be considered old.
Right.
Today, you still need to be fresh. You have to keep reinventing ourselves. So we always say we embrace our past, but we're always looking to the future. That we're not really hung up on trying to do everything old.
And I think that's where we've had a fear of doing too much about the generations and how old we are, because we don't want to seem old, because people don't want to go to an old amusement park that seems old and out of date. So it's embracing that history, but also celebrating the modernization of it all, but still having kind of that traditional aspect of it.
So it's a fine line to build.
Yeah. For example, the gyro steer is not there any longer.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's hundreds of rides that have come through this place, and you have to make the right decisions and keep moving ahead. And sometimes you lose some nostalgic things, but you also
make way for some new cool.
Well, and quite frankly, safety is our biggest concern, and certainly our focus of everything. And when the engineering and the things run out of time, you got to change them out.
Right.
Like a new car.
You got to.
They all have a shelf life.
Yep, got to change things out. So which is great. It's fun. That's the fun part of the business.
Yeah.
I love it. So when you're going through a process, just from a business perspective, talk about how do you make those kinds of decisions? What does planning look like from a business decision inside of your organization? Well,
unfortunately, it's all up here. That's my major focus. As we've mentioned before, earlier conversation, I travel the world on behalf of the park and our international association. So I've seen hundreds and hundreds of parks, and so I have thousands of friends out in the industry. So we really swap a lot of information with our fellow parks. I mean, I was on the phone this morning with a guy who owns in Shannon Forest, and I got something from an email from a guy down in North Carolina this morning. So we're always in contact with other parks, both family parks and theme parks. So we're always looking to see the trends, find out what's appropriate for us, and then really look at our mix of attractions and say, what's next.
Okay.
With the ultimate decision is we got to pay for it. We got to pay back the money that we borrow. One of the toughest things you got to do in this industry, and I think almost all industries, you have to set your ego aside, because you want to be the biggest, you want to have the latest,
the tallest, the fastest.
Our industry is driven by the S, but we have to do things that are size appropriate for us. So that's what we do is, and I really concentrate on, is making sure that we can get an attraction in here that works well for us, that fits within our budgets, that don't drive the gate to a price that will eliminate a certain segment of our community. So it's that fine balance of knowing how much to invest. And there's some rules of thumb in our industry of how much CapEx should there be versus your overall revenue. We tend to work within that range. But it's a fine balance to find that the right piece of equipment. And for any family business, especially one that ours is so capital intensive, that's a critical decision. And
right.
We don't stick our neck out as far as a lot of other places do from a debt standpoint. And this past year was a blessing for that. And not being open, and having a revenue for 18 months and still keeping a full staff on was a real test of making sure we invested properly in the past and weren't too far out on the edge. So it's a great balance we have to do, and we all discuss it. I might come in with some proposals, but a lot get shot down. And then once they get shot down, we're that probably wasn't a good idea. So we have it's us and the next generation, because she's going to inherit the debt. So at the end of the day, you got to make sure
right.
everybody buys into it, and it's the right thought of which way to go on.
Right. So we talked, you hit on the pandemic, that it's here right now. Walk us through. I mean, I found this so interesting. You're one of the few family businesses thus far that I've spoken to that was, the family was in business during the Spanish flu in 1918, and now COVID-19. So I'm nervous what the next thing's going to be called. So you had 1918, you had COVID-19, which something's going to be 20 for you guys, 100 years from now or something. So talk about that, Genevieve, if you don't mind. Just walk us through. I mean, is there family stories about what it was like going through the Spanish flu versus, and then compare it to what's happening now?
Well, we weren't around in 1918, so
Right.
I can't really attest to what happened then, but I know that we were able to get through it. We went through the Great Depression, a couple of the wars, so we definitely were resilient in that way. I think last year was something that none of us anticipated happening. None of us could have planned for that. We thankfully, like Rob said, we didn't have a huge capital investment that year, so it kind of timed out well. But I think the hardest part was the uncertainty of it all and not knowing when we could open. And it was week to week. Okay, the governor's office is going to say next week, and then we're going to hear in 2 weeks. And then once it became, middle of July, we finally got the call that we couldn't open at all. So I think having that, maybe next week we can open it, and then trailing the staff along, I think, was also very challenging. We kept on our full-time staff, and they were all very grateful. But then we also hired our normal 800 staff last year that were never able to start. So that was, I think, also frustrating, is getting ready, spending the money and the investment and the training and the orientating and all of that, to then have to pull the plug and not be able to open. I think that was also very frustrating. Personally, it worked out perfectly. I ended up having my first and probably only child last April. So I had a COVID baby. So it worked out personally great because I got to work more part-time and I wasn't here on nights and weekends like I normally am. So for me personally, it was a wonderful summer, but I know for everybody else in the country, especially at the park, it was definitely frustrating. But again, I would say just the anticipation and then the kind of the letdown of not being able to open, I think, was probably the most challenging.
Yeah, and I think
And obviously the financial situation, that's the biggest part.
And we were on pins and needles until, first New Year's, because, they really didn't come up with a PPP2 and then some of the other credits that we were taking advantage of until then. So we were really looking at some serious debt.
Right.
And when that came through, that really changed things for us. We had a great relationship with our bank, and they were really standing behind us and going to give us what we needed to do to get through. But
our accountants were an integral part of the process as well. We couldn't have done it without them.
They were working,
the backbone of it. They went over
hours and hours and hours just trying to maximize what, to make sure we took advantage of every program that was out there. At the end of the day, we did make out pretty well with it.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the beginning of the pandemic, and I've talked about this on the show before, but one of the things that we did, we had scheduled our first business coaching, strategy session for March 23rd, I don't know the exact date, but that, and yep, that got yanked. And we had in March and April and May, and we were all ready because I'm all, when I work with new people, it's all about just give value. And eventually you give enough value, people are like, oh, well, why don't we just work together? And so that kind of my philosophy, but we're like, we can't do that now. What do we do? And so we started doing webinars, and all of the webinars were supply chain. They were, cost, making sure you're getting your cash flow and your, in order, and you're watching everything, put together a 90-day budget, put together a 6-month budget, and be conservative as you're doing this stuff. And I will tell you, we've gotten some emails from people that went through that with us as we were sharing those moments. They're like, if you hadn't done those, I'm not sure I would have made the same decisions. And, we were telling people to be more conservative. I have friends in New Zealand and Australia that just were getting hit harder, and they were locking down even more. and they were telling us, they're like, look at, you're just starting to see this stuff coming to you guys. Be ready. And that was really a big help. So I go back to you, what you said, Rob, that network of having all of those people inside the association that you can talk to for different things, it's definitely helpful. And I talk to all the family businesses, if that are listening right now, if there's an industry association, get your next gen involved in it, get them, to understand those things. And Genevieve, if I'm not mistaken, you're even involved in like a family business group it's a private group that you guys just got together and put together. Can you talk about how that came about and some of the things that you guys talk about, that makes it work? Because I think that, I was really impressed. There's very few that take the initiative to do that. So what was the genesis of that?
That's a great question. So I was actually part of a group called Climb through the Chamber of Commerce of Rochester. And I met some other folks there that are my age, just kind of getting started in their careers. But I met a few business owners in that group, and a couple of us kind of talked offline. We knew a couple of other friends, and we basically started, I think, with a group of 5 of us, and I think we're up to 12 now. And it's all Rochester-based, family-owned businesses from a minimum of at least 2 generations or 3 generations up to, I think I'm the oldest, at the 6th generation oldest.
Right.
Of 6 generations. So what's neat is that we are all in non-competing industries. So we've got, a jeweler, we've got a car dealership, we've got security, we've got construction, an amusement park. So there's a variety of different things that we can trade secrets with. And what I think the best part is we're not talking about necessarily our individual businesses, but what works well, what we've learned, our struggles maybe with our family members. It's fully confidential, so I feel really safe in a comfortable place with these folks to be able to kind of talk about some of the harder things. And I think the best thing is that it's all very relatable. We're all in very vastly different industries, but it's all really the same when you're in a family business, and it's the same kind of struggles and the same perks and some of the same things that we can share with each other. And it's about growing. And we've been doing this, I think, 3 or 4 years now, so it's been great. And I'm also on the board of NISHA, which is our New York State Hospitality and Tourism Association. And then we're both active in our International Amusement Park Association. So just kind of, and then you're also on the Visit Rochester committee as well, on the board.
But another one that's very nice, we got this group of 13 parks.
Yeah, 13 amusement parks.
But it's family owned and managed parks.
Mm-hmm.
So we meet 3 or 4 days once a year at a park. They were here in 2019.
We hosted. We hosted here in Rochester.
And what's great about it is all the numbers are out on the table. Everybody trusts. We're all in non-compete areas, so we can't have parks that are close to each other.
Yeah.
But it's great because from all over the country and different sizes, but they're all family owned and multi-generational.
Yeah.
It's a great one because you have that network of people to talk to too.
And it's anything from where do you get your teddy bears to we've got this ride. What kind of safety features are you looking at? Down to how much you're paying staff. Something like that. So it's a variety of it.
But then when COVID hit, I'm talking to the president of Berry Lake, Six Flags, Chris Thorpe, once a week for 50 weeks. I mean, we're talking all the time.
Yep.
Talking to Albany, we're talking to the guys down in New York City, and because when you get into a crisis, it's bigger than an individual park. You really kind of having that network and reaching out of your little cocoon, and that's what really helped us get us through this thing. As frustrating as it was, at least we were all on the same page.
Gotcha. So
we got to turn the second page open, but we were still on the same first page.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. When talking about family-owned amusement parks throughout the U.S., where are you? I mean, do you have your fingers on are you the oldest, the second oldest, third oldest? Do you know where you are?
Yeah, it's somewhat debatable, but we're the 4th oldest park in the U.S.
Okay.
In the world.
13th oldest in the world. Amazing.
We believe the oldest family in the amusement industry in the U.S. because although we've only been at Sea Breeze since 1906, we started in 1876,
Something like that,
1876 in Philadelphia making carousel. So we were carousel builders prior to coming here. So we built and operated like 8 carousels around the country, and actually one in England. Well, there's a couple of families that have been at a single park longer than us. We're the oldest one in the country, and other than the Mack family in Europe, we think we're probably the second oldest in the world.
Wow.
The older parks in the world, like the Tivoli's of that nature,
Or
are
government,
government owned.
government,
The
or they've sold to corporate,
Yeah.
big corporate.
right.
stuff.
So there's not too many of our older than us.
Congratulations. That's
We also have this feeling that we're caretakers of this institution. As long as we can do it well, we're here. But when we feel like we're not up to it, or there's better ways to promote this park, we may not be here forever. We don't know. But we
Right.
want to make sure that Sea Breeze Park exists, forever. And we don't want it to be just,
Not about us.
not about us.
yeah.
That's fine.
That's really interesting. There's Tom Dean wrote a book called Every Family's Business. I highly recommend the book. And one of the things, he's got a series of questions that every business owner, every family should be asking annually. And one of the questions is, should we sell? And, we need to be ready. We should always have the business ready to sell, because if you ask, I mean, it's so many times, and Genevieve, this is probably, and for both of you have been through this. It's like, by the time you get to the third generation, it's only 3% ever make it that far. So, I mean, you guys are in the minority already. And that family legacy piece weighs heavy once you get past the third generation. And many family business advisors use those stats to pressure, how do we get family dynamics to work and make sure all these things happen. And I always say, you should be really proud if you do sell it as a family, because at that point, it's probably because the family was more important than the business. And at the end of the day, my belief, and this is my bias, so I'll throw it out there as a bias, is that, the Thanksgiving dinner table, or whatever your traditions are, or your religions are, when you're gathering as a family, that's more important at the end of the day and keeping people's passions and purpose in place than the business itself. So,
and to follow up on it, like I said, the business needs. We always want to make things move. Things change. So we while we certainly tend to be here,
Yeah.
we don't know. And
Right.
I think that's like you say, that's a very important thing to say. Got to keep planning for the future, and that you don't know what it's going to be. And at a certain point, it's quality of life and everything else. This is a very, very intense business.
yeah,
This
can only imagine.
Checks rolling. It's hands on, and if you're not hands on, you're not going to be a successful business. I always say, when guys say, "You play golf," I go, "What? 4 hours in the summer to play golf? No way!"
What's a boat? What's a beach? What is that? What are fireworks? I don't know.
So, and that was a wake-up call for us last summer when we had weekends off.
It was a nice little taste of what
we had-
it could be. But
4th of July together, not here. First time for me in 50 years.
yeah, we were on a boat on the 4th of July, and it was like, what is our life? What happened?
So
Wow.
side to it. That did give us a glimpse into another life, So it's
Sure.
so it's always a consideration. I got to keep different options.
One of the things, when we talked last time, like you said, you heard that idea of bringing family into in talking about the family not dynamics, but the history within the park. In my head, as you were talking, all I could see is one of those timelines of, we used to make carousels back at this point, and who were those people, the stories that went with it, and whatnot. And I've seen those on some of the family business websites for families that have a business, like what's, oh, come on. I apologize. I just had a brain cramp. Welch Allen. So Welch Allen has a little mini museum inside of, their business, and they give you this whole timeline that's kind of neat to walk through. And you guys, the timeline is so interesting. And
Here at the park,
We have one.
we have one. And we have
I have to, I make sure, you know what? It's over by the game section, isn't it?
In the
in the
carousel.
back of the carousel.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what else we have that is really cool is all around the park. My brother John put them up on this site, and there's a photograph
Of
of
what it
what used to be there. So there's 4 or 5 different rides in this site. There's like a dozen, a couple dozen of those around the park. So it's kind of neat because it puts it in context, and then the museum ties it all together.
I cannot wait to come through next week. Through the years, sometimes what happened for me is when I've made mistakes, when things have not gone right, those were some of the times when the best things came out of those moments. If you go back through and look at, either of your careers or even just stories that you've heard from the past, what were some of the things that, everybody says, oh, I wish we did that differently, but out of that blossomed something wonderful? Anything come to mind for you?
Probably not that one to bring up.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Tough stuff, and I think things that we didn't anticipate, like we had a big fire in '94, multi-million dollar fire, our loss, and that was in March, and that was a very, very tough. Not as tough as COVID, but very, very tough for us. And we had to do a gut check. Do we just take the insurance proceeds and so much of the park's gone, but our attitude was we got 10 minutes to feel sorry for ourselves. We better get going here. So we were able to open up the park 2.5 months after a devastating fire. And,
2 years later, we recreated the magic.
Yeah.
A new carousel.
And in fact, that was paintings behind us there. Those are little vignettes that were painted for rounding boards of our carousel we built 25 years ago. And I said, oh, those are kind of neat little collection. So, that was a tough thing, but it did change things financially for us. And it made us, we got to rebuild in a very nice modern version and put some different equipment in. And at the end of the day, it was a tough thing to go through, and we didn't lose too much money on it when it was all said and done, but it was a chance to regrow and reconfigure things. And that was a tough thing. That it wasn't a bad decision, but it was a bad decision because it happened on our watch, you get things like that are unforeseen deals. We fenced the parking and went to a paid gate. We used to be wide open, and safety and security got to be an issue in the '70s. And we said, "Oh, well, time to change." And that was tough for a lot of our guests who are used to coming and riding Jackrabbit and riding the carousel. But we knew that was the direction they had to go, and tough decision. We'll never look back to that decision.
Adding the water park, I think, was a big gamble. I think that was a huge gamble. That was the year I was born, 1986. Wonderful year.
Big gamble.
Big gamble. There weren't a lot of water parks. We were one of the first for the big manufacturer that we work with. I think we kind of helped,
Get those guys
going
Yeah.
in
Right.
Canada. So I think that was a big gamble to spend quite a bit of money on something that we don't know how well it's going to work out in New York when we're only open for 100 days. And those 100 days are not all guaranteed to be nice weather. It's lovely Rochester. We've seen in the last 2 weeks, we've had on and off rain. So I think that was a big gamble to put so much money into such a unique thing in New York at the time, 35 years ago.
Yeah.
But those are one of those things that you just got to gamble on, and it worked out really well. And it's made our park what it is today so much more successful. So I think that was a huge risk as well.
Yeah.
Wouldn't say mistake, but
When I look back at
Could
our
have been.
family, I think that my parents maybe were a little too risk averse and could have invested more money in the '60s and early '70s. I know my grandfather wasn't big into advertising. My father really brought in the more modern world of advertising and branding, and he really developed our group outing business. We didn't have all the company picnics and things, and he really developed that. And that, yanking that out from my grandfather and saying that there's other ways to run a business, and he really brought us into the the validity of group outings, which has been the core of our business. Not the core, but a strong backbone is a very essential piece of our business. And we really have a grandfather thank for that.
One of the things, an exercise that I like to do with family businesses is, we're all familiar with a SWOT analysis, right? The strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, but to make the generations do them separately. And by doing that, it's and spending the time to fill those things out, sometimes just ideas percolate out of that. And then I do the same thing, so that's just the family members, and you've got a bunch of you, but if everybody did them separately, but I do that with leadership teams. And then when you're comparing them, it's a really neat discussion point. So rather than, a lot of times we work on them together, and then what I've seen is sometimes the strongest voice in the room gets the most pieces, but by making everybody do it separately and really pushing people to do it, then talk about them, now it just creates such a really nice different discussion point. But
it's interesting. We did a version of that 2 years ago, and it was part of our emergency messaging planning and PR thoughts. And we had our senior management team involved in that. And what are the the threats and weaknesses, and guess what was it on there? A pandemic. That's one thing we
Sure.
never saw. And when
Literally.
we
Everything else we came up
we
with.
reconfigured it in the spring.
We
We
have
said,
this
well,
more or less.
nope, didn't figure about that one.
yeah, I would venture to guess that if every organization looked at the threat box, nobody had pandemic on there.
Nope.
So you're not alone. Don't beat yourself up too much on that one.
But I am happy that I was in serious discussions for a major water attraction last February, 2020 February. And I just started to get this sense that things aren't going well out there. And it's before it really hit New York and everything shut down. It was like, let's put this on hold. Boy, we were so glad we didn't commit to that. So it's like you got to read the tea leaves out there sometimes too.
Yeah, we when we were dealing with our our advice that we were giving out, we follow the leading economic indicators. And in October, it had nothing to do with the pandemic, but back in October of 19, we started to tell people, now's the time it's okay to hoard your cash. Don't worry about it. We don't know whether a recession is coming, but something's on the horizon based on the numbers that we're looking at potentially. Now, thankfully, I kept my own advice, and I had my dream car that I was supposed to be buying in January. And I said, I'm not going to do it right now. And same thing. I really made for a good decision to hold back. Talk about family for a second. You've got a lot of family members that are, working in the park still to this day. What are do you mind sharing some of the family traditions that, what are some of the family traditions when you all get together? What are some of the things that you like to do?
I think that's why we're so successful.
Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve.
I host that. And then we'd all go to, we do a lot of bonding when we go to our international association convention. We spend a week together and we do a lot of dinners and stuff like that. And we go to other parks. But we don't really spend a lot of time outside of the park together because we work together every day and we each have our own individual lives. We spend a lot of time together as daughter and son. And now that I have a grandbaby, we're over there a lot more now. Yeah. And some of us are closer. I'm really close with my aunt too. So it depends on the dynamics, but we don't spend a lot of time together outside of the park just because we're with each other a lot of the time.
That's kind of just the way it's happened.
Yeah.
And I think it's different in every family, so you're not trying to force to say, okay, now this is the week that we get together. This is the weekend to have these meetings and put these pieces together because you're together all the time. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's great is because we're all here, like something comes up. I think that's one of the beauties of the family business is to be able to have agile management that we can turn on a dime. Mm-hmm. That we had this one program that I said, let's change this a little bit. Change in one day.
Yeah. Right.
Just like everybody goes, yeah, I think you're right there. And just like we all just get together and say, either we come in here and talk about it or meet individually and we can come up with something and change it like that. And I think that's one of the beauties of a family business is you can really be change things in a timely manner to optimize. And we have to in a 100-day season. You can't say, well, we'll do that next year. Well, some things you can, but other things, hey, you got an opportunity now, we can make the decision. It's great.
I
Great.
think the other part too, I think of the family dynamic that has worked really well for us is I think the level of respect. I think because everybody kind of started from the same position and have worked their way up and have put kind of same sweat equity into the business, I think there's that level of respect. So although we don't hang out and do family dinners a lot, I think we all have this huge respect for one another and treat each other kindly and leave the harder conversations at work and come back and not let it tear us down or tear us apart. I would say I think that's something that I feel like I respect in the older generation is they really respect each other, and we may have heated debates or arguments, but it's never held against one another, or if one of us gets more feisty than the other, we all have some humility where we can come back and say, listen, like I reacted too strongly to that. Let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. And I think that has really helped us as well.
One of the hot authors, right, in the last 2 years is Brene Brown, and she talks about getting the team together and let's rumble this out. It sounds like your family rumbles very well and then moves forward.
Rumble it out individually, not as a unit.
Got it.
People have, when we don't, we're kind of, in fact, Jenny's always said we're a little too much conflict avoidance, or we, but for some reason that has worked for my generation. Not necessarily that's what's going to work for her generation.
Right.
Everybody has to have their work out the proper communications and stuff. And, I'll be feisty to somebody and we'll, kind of get a little snotty or whatever. And, but then you go make nice and maybe not, apologize, but you just kind of get on beyond it. And we've had a way of it's worked for us.
Great. Here's a question. Are there other members of G6 coming up in the business already?
Yep. So my cousin, I have two male cousins from one of his brothers. So they're brothers. And one is our director of IT and just general different projects, special projects he helps with. And then I have a younger cousin, his younger brother, who's just kind of getting his feet wet. He graduated college more recently, so he's trying to figure out what path he's on. But he's doing a variety of things with controls and technology and some marketing stuff. So we're kind of seeing which kind of path he wants to go in. So the three of us get along really well. I think we
different strengths.
Yeah, we're kind of yin and yang. I'm definitely more the outer social, out in the park, battling with people, and they're more on the back side of things. But I think what I lack, my cousins have, and maybe what my cousins lack, I have. So I think it's a good balance. And I wouldn't want to be the same as them, and I don't think they would want to be the same as me. And I think that's kind of what's nice about them too, is they're all a little bit different, but all have the same moral compass and the same foundation. And I think that's what matters. I may be more a little feistier than my cousins, and they may be a little bit more reserved, but it works. And one of us has to be feisty and one of us has to be more level-headed. So I think it kind of works out with us. And I look forward to that in the future. How do we navigate that? And I think what also is nice is my cousin and I went through a leadership training, a whole week-long thing with somebody locally. And I think we learned a lot about our own communication skills, but then also a lot about each other's communication skills and how do we talk to each other and how we approach different things and maybe our different viewpoints, and still being able to come back to the same page, I think is going to be beneficial. So they've all been working for 50 years, so they really know each other in and out and what their hot buttons are. And I feel like we're still kind of discovering that, but I think it's fun and I like people things, and I think I'm into that. So I think it's going to be fun going forward.
When you did the leadership program, was the it sounds like you took an assessment.
Yeah.
Was it DISC?
Well, yeah, the DISC, the 360. Yep. All of that. Definitely an heavy eye. Yeah.
A lot of times people that haven't been exposed to those. I think it's worth talking about those.
Yeah.
I did it with my whole family last year at Palumbos Family Vacation. And it was really interesting. That was the first time that they've allowed that. We brought in a specialist to teach people what that meant. And, just the family reluctantly did it.
Yeah.
Every one of them was just as it was really thankful that we did it together because it was such a great conversation and they learned a lot about each other.
And you're still talking to each other.
And we're still, and we're right. And we're meeting for
Yeah.
vacation this year.
Yeah.
It's funny because we don't, my father started our practice and then I bought half of it from him. I only bought the family businesses because that's my passion. I was also in a group, Genevieve, when I started 20 years ago when I was in Syracuse. And if it wasn't for the family business group that was part of the chamber there, I'm like, why does my dad do that? I don't understand these different dynamics and, what does this mean?
Or how did you approach that subject with your dad? What was the outcome? How did he react? What is his perspective on it?
Yeah, I learned lots about that.
Yeah, which is great.
So it's those groups that make a difference. And the work that you guys are doing as a family and just talking things through is admirable. To be going into the 6th generation, to be what did you say? I'm sorry, I just got the third oldest park in the fourth oldest family-owned park in the U.S. is just phenomenal. And it's a real testament to those things. When you're making decisions today, is there a guideline? Do you have like a set of, you just have been working through it for so long that it just works?
Yeah. And, I think that's one thing I just struggle with. It has a little tentative. If I'm not here driving it, when I don't want to do this forever, who's going to be that focal point of especially for development of the park? Because that's a unique skill set.
Yeah, I'm not an engineer by trade, so I'm not good with that stuff.
Yep.
So we've got a couple holes that we got to fill, I think, for the next generation. I certainly can't do it all. And I think you're going from 4 people that are managing down to 3. So we just got to figure out how to cut up the pie, I would say. And then do we have to bring somebody in? I think that's still a potential as well.
Right.
To help manage the day-to-day stuff or some experience that one of us is lacking.
Well, if as a business coach, if ever there's a tool or something where you're running into a hole to say, do you have another way of doing this? Feel free to just reach out and happy to give you, some of those things if I can help. If you're talking to other family businesses, which you are right now, but if you were imparting your advice to the next generation, the rising generation, Genevieve, what would you share with them? And then Rob, I'd ask you the current generation, what's the advice that you might, share with them? Either one of you can dive in.
Yeah, I would say find your passion. And if it's the park, jump in head first and you do it and you learn from the bottom and you work your way up and you have that passion and you kind of put your head down and you just do it. I feel like that's kind of how I was raised. But also have compassion. I think sometimes in a business world, it's very, what's the word? Can be tiresome. And I think having the ability to recognize other people and how hard they're working, I think that is beneficial. I think maybe the older generations, it's just expected. Whereas I feel like my generation and younger want that a little bit more encouragement. So I think that's what I would ask from the older generation is the encouragement and the belief that you can do it. And then I would say for my generation, it's work your buns off and it'll pay off and it's worth it and it's fun and it's passionate and it's tiring and it's hard. But you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for the community and for the business. And it, at the end of the day, it's all worth it.
Great.
You want me to give recommendation for that generation or my generation?
Or both.
If you could both, why don't you, what would you tell the controlling generation?
It actually is the same thing.
Okay.
We're talking about transitioning. When you get to a job for 50 years, you're not going to be there for 80 years. Hopefully. Well, hopefully I am. There is a finite time frame, and I think one of the things that I see especially with other family businesses and parks. Our generation doesn't know how to let go. And I think that's the wisdom I have to give to Genevieve, but mostly to other people and myself is, things aren't going to be done the way you want them to do always. And you have to let them make mistakes. They can't, hopefully don't make a critical mistake. We're very cognizant of that, especially with safety and with our employee relations and things, that we got to make sure things are being done right. But at the end of the day, they have to put their own brand on it and let them do it. And I think this year, especially after the kind of the break of the year, that did give us, that's one of the silver linings. It gave us a time to step back and say, we don't have to do everything and we don't have to micromanage every detail. And I think that's become more apparent this year. So for our generation, is let it go, and for their generation, do it and show us you can do it.
Right.
And then take the responsibility to do it, which has been tough because they haven't been given the responsibility. So it's this point of thing of saying that unless we were to leave and say, okay, I'm retired, you figure it out. We hope to
I don't want that. I don't want it to be one day. Here's the keys. Good luck. I'm not ready yet either.
And I think earlier you were.
Oh yeah, when I was like 20 something, I was like, I can do this. You need to retire tomorrow. Get out of here. Get out of my way. And then I realized, wait a minute, I don't know nearly enough what I need to know, especially on the back end things. I think operationally I'm pretty sound, but I think on the back side of things and the government relations and the financial stuff, I still have a ways to go. But it's that kind of young cockiness when you get out of college and you think you know everything and you're invincible. And I think I've had to have a few reality checks, and I think we've had some tougher discussions about it. And I may not always get what I want, but I think at the end of the day, we have a huge respect for one another, and we know we can't do it without the other. And it's finding that middle ground to see, okay, what's the next step and how do we continue this and how do we continue our legacy? And if it's not us, then what's the best course of action for the park? None of us want that. We are all in it. We're as thick as we can. And none of us want to see it change, but we also know in reality that it may not be. So it's kind of just adapting with the times and figuring out, because the world now in 2021 is not the world that it was in 1920 or 1879. So how do we continually?
And that's the one thing that we see now. When we came into it, the park was nowhere near shape. And, we really no money, and very we had to really work hard to get it where it is today. It's much more complicated now doing business in New York State than it was in the 70s and 80s. It is a complicated world, and it's a rapidly evolving world, and it's not easy in business today. That's the one thing you see out there on the clouds on the horizon is, boy, you really got to be paying attention. It's not easy. It's not an easy buck anywhere anymore. So it's a challenge.
I would agree. If somebody's coming to the park tomorrow, what would be, what are the two or three things? I know it's different for everybody, but you mentioned one. I think paying attention to the park history and seeing the museum and the signs and taking the time to really appreciate that would be one thing I would say don't miss. What are take a ride on the Jackrabbit and remind us, where does the Jackrabbit fit in terms of wooden coasters around the world?
So it's the oldest continuous running wooden roller coaster in the country, which the American coaster enthusiasts have made a landmark for us. So it's actually a landmark, which is really cool. So it's got a great history. What was
101 years old?
Yeah, 101 years old. We couldn't celebrate the 100th birthday last year because of COVID, so we made sure to bring it back nice and strong this year for 101.
But when we were getting all bummed out last summer, we could just go fire up the Jackrabbit.
Yeah, we rode it a couple times.
It's great.
COVID, did you guys go and use the park? Love it. Oh, there's one of those.
Flowers were all planted. Yeah, we're ready to go.
Good for you.
One thing I would recommend, so obviously checking out the history. 2 is unplug. Don't be on your cell phone. Live in the moment. Enjoy your family time. Enjoy people. Enjoy interacting with other people. We are such a melting pot of diverse people from Rochester, and it's great to see everybody coming together and having a great time. And I think not being on your cell phone and living in that world, I think that's another benefit. And just having fun and letting go and trying things that you may not want to get on the teacups, but maybe your kids are begging you to do it and you try it out, or just kind of soak up the moments. I feel like a lot of us, especially my generation, lives on their phones and in technology. And I think that's maybe why people really like it, because this is an outdoor experience provided facility. And I think people really should soak that up.
Great. I want to thank you both for joining us today and sharing parts of your story. I'm certain that, if I had 13 other questions here, we could talk for about 5 more hours. And because the history is so rich, and really, we have a lot to be proud of here in Rochester to have you guys here, and you have been great stewards of the Sea Breeze legacy. So appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Everybody get out, go see Sea Breeze. If you're not in the area, make sure go look at their website and just look at the history and and just kind of soak in what this family has done. They've got a lot to be proud of, and I'm sure there are other family business venues that would be happy to speak with you about what you've done. Thank you for joining us. My name is Michael Palumbos. I'm with Family Wealth and Legacy here in Rochester, New York. You've been listening to the Family Biz Show. If you've liked what you've heard today, please make sure you hit the subscribe button, and so that the other episodes can be coming to you on a regular basis. And we wouldn't get so mad if you leave us a nice little recommendation, or hit that 5-star button afterwards, so that my mom's not the only one telling everybody what a great show this is. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a great week.
Thank you.